I'd like to introduce myself before I introduce the panelists. I'm Ben Swanger, the executive editor for DCEO Magazine. We are the business publication for D Magazine here in Dallas, which is the city magazine. And so I'm a big sports nut, and we recently put out a magazine on the power of play. As Noel said, sports has this just incredible power to influence all kinds of aspects of this world. So I am looking forward to our conversation. I'd like to introduce our panelists now. We'll start with Meghna Tari. She is the Chief Sustainability Officer for the North Texas FIFA World Cup Planning Committee. Come on up. Next, I would like to introduce Riley Nelson. She is the Head of Sustainability for NASCAR. Let's welcome Michael Kraus to the stage. He's the Interim Executive Director of the Green Sports Alliance. And finally, Sarah Hussein, the Head of Environment for FIFA 2026. Test, test, test. All right. Welcome, everybody, and thank you all for being here this morning. Now, 2026, it's a big year. I hear there's quite the event coming to North Texas and this entire continent. 2026 will be the largest World Cup ever. 3 countries, 16 cities, millions of fans. Now, I know we're not all involved with the World Cup, but we have a handful on stage that are. So what does winning on sustainability actually look like at this scale? And how do you define success in a way that's measurable and real? Meghna, would you like to kick us off?
Of course. Thank you, Ben, for moderating the panel, bringing your expertise, and thank you to everyone for coming here to learn about what the North Texas FIFA World Cup Organizing Committee is doing for sustainability. I've been in this profession for 15 years, and winning in the world of sustainability always is a strategy where you move beyond the financial hurdle, or this is something that we need to do, and actually viewing sustainability as something that gives you a competitive advantage and gives you success in operational efficiency. So that's always the principle that I operate with. And for the World Cup, I think it's emphasizing our work and our strategy and our commitment on, the 3 pillars of sustainability: social, environment, and economic, but also measurable outcomes in our operational strategy and in infrastructure, pursuing LEED Gold certification for the Dallas Stadium, for the convention center, working with our vendors, our contractors, Fan Festival, on making sure that waste management is a big part of our strategy and we have measurable outcomes and success and report on those numbers and data. That is truly something that we are focused on. But success ultimately comes to what Noel and Angela mentioned in their opening remarks. What do we set up the stage for beyond the World Cup after July 19? What does Dallas look like, and how do we plan and prepare for the next sporting event, which it's going to come to Dallas? And so that's my focus.
Sarah, would you like to go next?
Sure, just me. Okay, making sure this works. Good morning. Thank you, Ben. Thanks for moderating, and to my other panelists for having me here, and to you all for joining us this morning. I haven't necessarily been in the sports or event sustainability space that long. This is actually my first venture with FIFA 26. I come from other industries, so it's been a really interesting transition to see how do you bring sustainability into this space and make it long-lasting. So when I think about success after the World Cup or even during, it's really that local legacy. What can we implement? What can we further throughout our host city partners, with our commercial partners, even internally at FIFA, that will move on from these 16 cities communities in these 3 countries, and really what can we leave behind for, like Meghna said, the next sporting event that may come in their neck of the woods, or just for that local community, whether it's a local pitch or something at the venue or something larger scale at the city. But we're really looking at what are those local legacies that we can place in these spaces that really help build sustainability at the core within our local partners. So that's really what comes to mind for me.
Now, Riley, you're playing in a different playing field, a track actually, with NASCAR, but you're putting on pretty large events as well all over the world. So, what does winning with sustainability look like for your organization?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And just quickly, I worked at the Russia World Cup in 2018, so this is a very full circle moment for me, coming back in my sports roots. But yeah, at NASCAR, we have mostly permanent fixtures, permanent racetracks. We do have a few temporary tracks or events on the schedule, and that's been a newer endeavor for us and something that's really important as we reach new communities, reach new audiences. And our main flagship temporary event has been the Chicago Street Race the last couple of years, and that's been a really great success from across multiple fronts. It's helped drive over $100 million of economic value to the city of Chicago. It's brought new tourists, new tourism. Our first race had representation of fans from all 50 states and over 15 countries, and 2/3 of those fans said they would come back to the city of Chicago and wanted to come back for a vacation. So the economic value is there, which is kind of obviously one of the most important factors. But then when you have that economic importance, how do you then leave that sustainability legacy, that community legacy? And that's where NASCAR Impact comes into play and plays a part. NASCAR Impact has 3 pillars: community building, STEM excellence, and healthy environments. All 3 of those pillars show up equally race to race weekend. And within Chicago specifically, from to Sarah's point, how do you leave a legacy behind? We are now working with all 8th grade public school classrooms in the city of Chicago and implementing a 2-week virtual crew chief curriculum. So over 70,000 students have taken this curriculum and learn about NASCAR through the physics principles of force and motion, and learn and access a piece of education that might not be necessarily as interesting as now when you have the sports brand or a NASCAR brand. And from a sustainability perspective, that's how we go from pilot project to implementing across something a little bit more permanent. Where we've seen most success in Chicago is actually with our temporary power and working with temporary power systems. And we've been implementing hybrid power generators and batteries as well. And from the first year to where we were last year, we've seen over 27% diesel reduction just in tinkering with how the layout of generators. And that's, for anyone that's been to a live event, that is massive when you think about the smell and the scale of and how we can then find those wins and take them to some of our permanent tracks where the impetus to change maybe isn't there in the same way.
Yeah. Very impressive. Now, Michael, you're working with Green Sports Alliance. Tell us about how what winning looks like from your perspective.
Yeah. Thank you for hosting, and Meghna for inviting, putting this all together. So Green Sports Alliance, just for context, we kind of sit at the center of sports and sustainability within North America. Mostly, we do have, so we're a membership organization. Think NFL, NHL, MLS, NBA, MLB, NASCAR, FIFA. These are members of the Green Sports Alliance, and so our role is really twofold. And so these would probably be our measures of success as well, which is one, how do we green the venues? How do we make this event as environmentally responsible as possible? That could be a fixed venue, could be a temporary event, it could be a whole range of things. And I think we'll chat more about that. But what I want to really hone in as the other side of our mission right now, which you guys will probably agree with this, and to put a wet blanket on this discussion for a second, which is people don't listen to science. That's not a thing that, I mean, maybe this room does, but largely that's not what's hitting all the headlines. However, people listen to sports. We know that. We've seen movements grow from athletes, from their voices being leveraged. We have seen brands lean into campaigns that drive change far more than the IPCC report coming out has been able to do. I think of some of the legends, Muhammad Ali and Billie Jean King, and some of these folks who have led this. And then you think of these events, these moments where we can take an opportunity to leverage the eyeballs watching, to tell a story. And if we're gonna have a seminal moment in which the climate has a shift, it has to be something that everyone's bought into and culturally normalized. And so I think this event, we've got the Women's World Cup in 2031, we've got LA 28 coming up, the Olympics, we've got the Olympics in 34 in Salt Lake City. There's so many moments that the United States in particular has to create that over the next decade. So this is, I mean, super exciting, obviously, that FIFA has leaned into this conversation so much. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and like you said, you know, you're interfacing between all kinds of different leagues, all kinds of different sports, in all kinds of different countries. So with all the different regulations, infrastructure, and priorities in those places, how do you build a unified sustainability strategy without losing effectiveness at the local level? Michael, we can keep it with you on this one.
Good question. Yeah, let's figure that one out. I mean, where we are right now is it's leadership driven, right? So we see the most successful versions of this are where leaders are committing to this, and where they're leaning into this idea that sustainability is not a category to the left, but it's central to, as a business unit, that it is actually generating revenue and not just in returns on efficiencies or decarbonization. I mean, the organizations on this stage know that there is money to be made in this too, so this should be at a leadership level. And then as a movement, and this is how the Green Sports Alliance really thinks, as a movement, we've got to be thinking of what are those moments, or excuse me, not a moment, what are the, how do we galvanize the leagues to come together on a particular issue, right? And say, hey, we as a league are going to stand for this, and we're going to trickle that down to our venues, and then for leagues to come together and do that. Most of our leagues sit in New York City. How do we get those together and say, let's row in the same boat here? We see that happening. We as the Green Sports Alliance convene the leagues quarterly to talk about this. So there's a lot of momentum in this space, and the presentation this morning was talking about investment hasn't changed. Communications changed recently, but investment hasn't changed. So I think, it's everyone, it's leaders buying into it and then seeing other leaders buying into it.
Riley, what would you say? You know, you're operating at the league level, but how do you communicate the strategy to the different cities and markets that you operate in and the different tracks as well?
Language is a really important part of our role in our worlds. You can't assume that what you say in one room is going to work in another room, and that goes market to market as well. And so it's really about understanding the challenges that exist at the local level. We have our core goals. We have our NASCAR impact strategy. Our main goal is net zero operating emissions by 2035. Do I say that outside of a business room very often? No, that is very much meant for a business audience and for an executive audience. But when you're actually at the track level and the operator level, you're asking, what does your energy mix look like? What do your utility bills look like? What pain points do you have with your facility? And asking questions that actually resonate with the people that are working at those places. And then that's how you begin to build trust, but also progress. Because when people realize it's not this kind of big myth or this big challenge that is hard to overcome, it's something that they interact with on a day-to-day basis, it makes it a lot easier to work together to figure out how you can find creative solutions to problems that might seem impossible to solve at the beginning.
Yeah. Now, these are all inherently temporary events, but the expectation is long-term impact, as was said in the opening. How do you operate with a permanent sustainability mindset when everything about the event is short-term? What actually sticks? Meghna, would you like to start this one?
What actually sticks is, in the world of sustainability people always talk about systems thinking, right? Everything is part of the puzzle. You are a non-linear thinker. A plus B is not always equal to C in the world of sustainability. So you always try to put that puzzle together. And you can plan for everything, right? Like if you have a strategy, for North Texas, for example, we would focus on transportation, which is a big deal. We would focus on Fan Festival, energy, waste management. But Nicholas Taleb talks about in his book the Black Swan. Like the Black Swan are the events which are of massive scale, have unprecedented consequences, and they are always easy to explain in hindsight, like the COVID pandemic or the subprime mortgage. You can justify and explain after it has happened. But in the world of sustainability, we always prepare for the bell hump of the curve. This is what's going to happen, and we are going to prepare for this. But nobody plans for the black swan, the thing that happens at the tail end, and that is something that really keeps me up, or also makes you pay attention to what you are doing for a global event of this scale, because that's where unprecedented events like extreme heat or failure of the energy grid can happen, and those are some of the things that you need to keep in mind. Have a plan A, B, and C, and go, because the scale of this is just too big to fail.
Sarah?
Yeah, great question. So for FIFA 26, we're a moment in time, as Michael said. We're an event that's happening in North America, but we're going to leave town soon, and we're going to move on to our next location. So when I came into the role and I really thought about permanence, it was twofold for me. One, FIFA as a whole, that's based in Zurich, has long-term goals, objectives around sustainability. So making sure when we look at the North American context that we're aligning and helping to move the needle towards those goals that are not necessarily, nuanced to any other industry, to cut emissions by 2030, to, get as close to neutrality by 2050, long, hefty goals. But 2026 has a moment to, create precedents, give good examples. So when we thought about permanence, we really focused it around planning and implementation. And I know those could be fluff words, but I promise if I can elaborate just real quickly on that, is how do we start from the get-go on creating clear strategic objectives, not only for FIFA 26, but then as, trickling it down to our local cities, and making sure that it's super clear what are our topic areas. FIFA 26 has 7 key objectives. I will not bore you with all of them. They fall under very pertinent sustainability topics: air, water, waste, biodiversity protection, fan engagement. We've got these key objectives, and we really wanted to make sure we could, as much as possible, implement it in the same way across all 3 countries, across all 16 cities. Meghna mentioned, we've got a requirement around all venues getting a sustainable certification. There are many other examples of that. And if I can just connect it to your earlier question, Ben, all these 16 cities, these 3 countries, they're not alike. They could not be more different in the current world landscape that we're in. However, having those key objectives and implementations as streamlined, then it's just a change of, hey, what is that market saying? Do we need to just adjust how we're implementing it, but we're keeping the objective and the initiative and the goal still that North Star. And that has worked for us in 2026, where then we do see the same consistent sustainability initiatives implemented and ideally kept long-term as other events will roll in post us, but really then having that permanence not only internally at FIFA, but then at the local level.
Now, take us behind the scenes for a moment. What is the most difficult sustainability challenge to solve at a mega event? Is it waste, energy, transportation, fan behavior, something else? And where is the industry still falling short? Sarah, I can kick it back to you.
That's a big question. So my lens will come from that I don't come from the mega event or sporting event space. So I feel like, take my words with a grain of salt. But I do see that as an industry, but also as an organization, the internal education that is needed across, let's just speak for FIFA, of what does sustainability mean in our context for us to truly implement and weave, as I think the initial speaker said, from the beginning, so that it's not something we're just trying to plug in as the planning continues, but really something that comes at the beginning. And that's across departments. We have 60 departments in Miami, where I'm based right now. And as Riley said, Temporary Power is a huge team. We've got our logistics teams, we've got overlay, we've got hospitality, we've got catering, we've got our project management team. All these departments have an impact. And so what I'd say, long term, what I see is that in the sports sector, but even in the mega event space, if I can be so bold, is what does sustainability mean for us, and how does that weave into everything that we do? I come from oil and gas and tech, and it's just a different approach where that is, something that's woven into what are we operating, and how can we make it more sustainable? But I definitely think this space is way more complex, if I can say that, because it's temporary a lot of the time, and it's moving locations. So it's not, and so with that, I give grace to that complexity, but I hope in the long run that becomes something of a standard of how does that get implemented across sports and mega events.
Yeah, I think the challenge is the scale of the event. I mean, for North Texas region, transportation is a big priority. When you have 100,000 visitors coming in every day, waste management at Fan Festival is a priority, energy efficiency is a priority. But also putting it into local context, DFW is really the fastest growing metroplex in the region, right? We are already experiencing massive demand for energy, water, and infrastructure because of all the people that are moving in every day. And then you throw in a mega event like this. It is sort of a stress test for the region to see how many 100,000 visitors every day is going to impact the availability of water, energy, waste management, even transportation. So those things are really a priority. But like Sarah said, I think also education. I think people like to be part of the movement and people like to contribute. Sometimes they just don't know how. And that part of an education and awareness is equally important than putting infrastructure and strategies in place, because you want the people, you want the community to be part of the conversation.
Riley, what do you think?
I definitely agree with what both of you said. I think how I think about this is when you think about education, that's a solvable challenge, and that if you've done well, there's ways we can engage our catering teams, our project management teams, etc. The one that keeps me up at night, because there's not really an angle for us to come in and say, change this overnight or educate around that, is fan travel, especially because we have very rural areas that we race in and we operate. And you think about Talladega, you're 45 minutes from Birmingham, you're an hour and a half from Atlanta. Those are the two closest airports, but most people are either taking RVs or driving in, and there's no way for us to say, drive an electric RV, because that doesn't really exist right now. So it's very much up to the preference of the fan, and there are ways that we can encourage shorter travel, carpooling, offering buses from some major hubs, but because of where we operate, that just doesn't exist in a lot of cases, and so that's just one area that will be very much outside of our control for the near future until we figure out ways that we can kind of subtly help influence but drive to EVs and push to EV.
Michael?
Yeah, I'm going to go back a question for just a second, in that talking about this permanent mindset, I think this idea that FIFA and others are doing around what do we leave behind is just as important as what we're doing. I think that is a legacy that FIFA has. I think that's a legacy we've seen with the Olympics going all the way back to London 2012 too, is we're going to invest in the local community. We're going to leave that behind better than we found it. And so when we think of the trajectory of these mega sports, it is very encouraging to see that as a part of the conversation, more than, hey, we're going to try to sort all the waste for the event and then we're leaving. We want to do that. Let's do that. Sounds great. However, if we're not setting up that venue for future success to do that, or that city, I think we're missing an opportunity. And what we see is there are so many sustainability projects that could be green lighted at any given time, but they're lacking leadership willpower, political willpower, whatever it is. A mega event skips all that. You can jump front of the line and get a whole bunch of projects over the finish line, or even to the starting line, maybe, for these mobility issues, for public transportation, for example, within cities. You've got in Kansas City, they're extending their, what do they call it, their metro line to the stadium, right? That's an example they're doing with FIFA. They're doing as a part of that host committee, to make that easier for fans to get to the stadium. That's going to outlive the stadium. So we like to see that. I don't even remember the question, if I'm being honest. So.
Yeah, you started with the permanence, and then we are all discussing as well just the most difficult sustainability challenge to solve at mega events. Could be waste, like you mentioned, energy, transportation, whatever.
I mean, I'll give it a go. I think it depends. There are venues like Mercedes-Benz Stadium where they sort their waste. right? They're zero waste, they're true certified, they're doing an incredible job. So that's not what you have to focus on in Atlanta. Let's focus on other issues. There are some venues that are outside, and the FIFA takes place in the summer. So hydration, water access might be the most critical issue in some places. Like, how do we make sure there's fans have access to water? Mobility, I think, is the perpetual one. You're going to see how many fans coming into this country, right? This is how do we give them the tools and the resources? It depends on the event, depends on the crowd, and the infrastructure that's there. I think perpetually, waste will always be so complicated. It involves the entire supply chain down to sorting and your MRF and your compost. I mean, you have to do a whole thesis to figure out zero waste. So, but it is encouraging on the other ones. I think there are solutions, right? If you want to decarbonize from a battery standpoint or from renewable energy standpoint, there are solutions there we can plug into, in some cases literally. And so I think, it depends on the context, but
Now, I talk to C-suiters on a daily basis here across North Texas. Everyone talks about sustainability goals, but execution often comes down to operations. What does it actually take on the ground level to make something like waste diversion work at scale, and who owns it?
Oh, I can take it. So for example, we are having Fan Festival for 34, 35 days. What does it take? Well, first of all, we started with volunteer training. So we have trained 200 volunteers to help us out during Fan Festival on guiding people. Don't throw plastic wrappers in recycle bins. Most people don't know that, but you're not supposed to throw plastic wrappers in recycle bin because it contaminates the whole load and it also jams up the MRF machinery. But people don't know that. So don't throw food waste in recycle bin. People do that. So there's a concept of education and there's a concept of infrastructure, right? So we are tackling both. We have trained our volunteers. We have mapped the Fan Festival to decide how many bins do we want to place at that location. We have contracted, or Coke has contracted with Circular Solutions that will help us track everything from the producer to the hauler to the MRF, so that we can track the reuse and the recycle materials, but we can also do the calculate the capture rate, the diversion rate, provide at the back sorting and reduce contamination. So that's a massive scale for waste diversion at a Fan Festival, and numbers speak. I believe in God we trust. Everybody else bring data. And that speaks to me. So I am on top of it to track how much are we going to divert and recycle. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect 100%, but lessons to be learned and to be improved from that stage.
I think for us, it's how do you make, not necessarily in the way that you're about to say, but how do you make it personal in a way that is something that resonates with people. And I'm going to misquote this, but there's someone that said people remember the way that you made them feel. And I think that very much resonates within the sustainability space, and how we've gotten success across some of our programs is that it was a visceral response, not just something of, okay, I did a job well done. For example, we composted all of our back of house at all of our tracks now, all of NASCAR-owned tracks, and that started with the loading dock areas were smelly during a race weekend. And so by isolating food and food scraps in two separate bins in a separate part of loading dock, that made the work experience better and made people happier being in the loading dock. And that seems like a small thing, but that caught like wildfire then across all of our stadiums or all of our racetracks, because you've created a visceral experience if you've made it a more fun place to go to work. And same thing on a recycling side. We've had success recently at our track in Phoenix. We introduced recycling to campgrounds for the first time in several years, and we had an overwhelmingly positive response from fans saying, we want more blue bags, we want more of an opportunity to recycle, and campgrounds are a specific challenge for NASCAR. And that was a really great signal to our operations team on the ground that they're doing something right, and that they felt good about how they're bringing an enhanced fan experience to a new group of fans. So when you're connecting it to feelings and to ways that either fans, operations teams, whatever stakeholder group you're talking about can actually feel positive or feel something that is more than just, okay, I did a job well done, that actually enhances a different part of their job, then that's a really key factor for us.
Can I take a quick stab? So I'm going to be twofold again with this. Going to give a shout out to our FIFA 26 venues, obviously not having a lean towards Magna and Dallas at all. But really for FIFA 26, we lean on our venues. We have picked great partners that really do take waste as a high priority topic and putting in the right processes and procedures to get the right numbers, I would say, at the end of our tournament and matches that they have at their respective venues. But I'm going to lean into what you said, Meghna, on the data side. That's something that for FIFA 26, once again, we're a moment in time. I really like that. I'm just going to keep using it now till we get to the tournament. A great moment in time. But is for us is not only for FIFA, how can we look at what does waste data look like from the 26 perspective, but then also for the venues that, you can imagine they're across the spectrum when it comes to how they deal with waste, but nonetheless still a high priority. So we've collaborated with a commercial partner of ours to have every single venue actually sign up for an online data tool for them to track not only how it's separated and how it's brought together at the venue all the way to the MRF and so on, to really see what do those diversion rates look like, what's being separated, how much has it been contaminated, so that the result of that is those venues can get better post the tournament as well, really having clear data, because that's a huge struggle. And then also for FIFA to understand when we come, because this won't be the last Men's World Cup and the Women's World Cup is coming back in 2031, and a lot of times, it's coming back to those same venues, to really then say, what do we need to support and further as a temporary party coming in to help really resolve the issue of waste and how it's dealt with. So it's a great question.
So, Michael, you mentioned earlier just the power of sports, the influence that athletes have. You all up here are clearly experts in sustainability, but how do you move this to the fan level, turning fans into participants in sustainability, actually changing behavior, not just raising awareness?
That is the central question in so many ways. We're going to have millions of impressions. We think about this in terms of, waste materials, zero waste is a great example of this. What's the most tangible way you can get in front of a fan? It's the cup they're holding. It's their plate they're eating off. What's the moment that they're going to be introduced to composting? And the word we use is normalize, right? How do we normalize some of these behaviors? A lot of people don't have compost at home, right? So you need to go to a stadium once, twice, 10 times, see it. It starts to normalize. There's been a lot of strategies around fan engagement, but I think these ideas of not being overkill is also something we're seeing people adopt. It's just a part of the everyday operating procedures of a particular venue or an event that over time can create behavior change. We are, at the Green Sports Alliance, we release playbooks every year, resources to the industry for free. And we released one a couple years ago on reuse, reusable cups in particular. And that has been a really good fan engagement opportunity for the industry to, it does a couple things, right? And I do not work for the reuse industry, but these cups, they're better to drink out of. They're sturdier. You can wash them. You use them again. There's a circularity directly to it that is engaging to fans. This year, we're releasing a playbook on sustainable apparel, right? This is what we think of when we think of brands. The scarf for FIFA, the soccer scarf, right? The jerseys for a particular sport. It's not really apparel, but in your world, like you can picture, you can picture a NASCAR like that, right? We see the brands, and so if we can engage on the most visual aspects of sustainability too, and bring that to fans, then we're going to normalize the sustainability conversation as opposed to trying to shove it into the conversation.
Riley, what would you say in NASCAR? You made a funny comment earlier. You can't force your fans to drive EV cars or whatever, so how are you doing it?
Great segue. So ABB is the official electrification partner of NASCAR, and they're the brand sponsor on our first electric prototype, the ABB NASCAR EV prototype. This is a fully electric race car. It was debuted at the Chicago Street Race 2 years ago, and it is honestly just a really cool piece of technology, and it's a fast race car, and it's fully electric. And by just putting it on the track and bringing it to where the fans already are. It invites a conversation about electrification, about regenerative braking, about EVs, where a fan that might not have ever considered driving one or might have certain stigmas around EVs all of a sudden sees this technology within the package of their favorite sport and is able to then talk to the driver, talk to the engineering team, and just ask questions and be curious about what does this technology actually mean? How is it something that can be brought back into their life? And we're not tracking kind of adoption of then who's purchasing EVs, but at least it's starting a conversation, and maybe the first conversation in some cases where someone's actually had a positive experience with an electric vehicle in a way that's, again, familiar and within the context of a sport that we know and love. So that's been a really successful campaign of just, again, seeing engagement at the ground roots level and seeing the curiosity that comes from having just a cool piece of technology and innovation.
Let's go down the line here for one final question. Meghna, what defines the next era of innovation in sustainability?
I think, there was a recent study that came out for Dallas-Fort Worth from SMU that talks about how DFW area is not meeting the demand for innovation, and we are actually behind 30%, and that just blew my mind. We are in a region where so much growth is happening, companies are moving, and so I think the fact that we are lacking innovation in the region is actually something that should encourage us all to put our effort into time, money, and expertise. We have so many higher education institutions in the region, have tier 1 institutions that provide the research talent. And so for the next sporting event, putting together an innovation hub might be a really good idea, because that is what will drive 5 years from now the worlds of, just sustainability, not just sports sustainability, anything. Bringing in innovation will really, really make a big difference when you consider the economic impact of events this scale.
Riley?
This depends on certain state regulation, but in a perfect world where I see our tracks going is, in a lot of cases when a NASCAR event comes to a race, or a race weekend comes to a certain market, we're in very rural areas and we rack up very high demand charges and significant energy draw from the grid. We have massive properties, we have these racetracks. In a perfect world, battery energy storage becomes more commonplace across our facilities, and we're actually helping support the grid and helping modernize the grid in certain areas, and not just drawing power when we have our event weekends. And I think that's something that's obviously a regulatory challenge as well, but as we continue to grow in this space, that would be my goal and hope that how we evolve.
It's a good answer. I echo that. I think we're coming into an era in which insurance and de-risking the industry has to be central to the conversation. Sporting events getting canceled. Last year, a roof was ripped off of MLB venue. So when we talk about innovation, we really need to be talking about risk mitigation, right? How do we keep the lights on at these venues? So the idea of battery backups, of multiple grid connections, of coming up with ways to keep the lights on, and I think is critical. My personal interest in this this is very encouraging, is seeing the growth of biodiversity also within bringing the outdoors indoors to sports venues, and giving people these opportunities of experiencing nature actually at games, with some of these community engagement opportunities, local gardens, foundations and sports teams investing in and local biodiversity projects too. I think is one of these offshoots where sports has the ability to be strangely impactful in the local community, and I find that very exciting.
Sarah, you've got the final word.
I was going to say, these are hard acts to follow. I actually may go on a more qualitative route. When I think of innovation in this space, I think of standardization. And that doesn't mean, hey, everybody's got to just follow one lead, but coming into this space of sports and mega events, I see the gambit. Some venues, some leagues, some cities, have clear focuses, and it might just be the top 3 topics of sustainability. Others have robust strategies and are trying to tackle everything. But as one starts to compare across various industries, and it's not apples to apples, but I think a standardization in this sports mega event space of when we think of sustainability, hey, here are the top things, whether that's biodiversity, whether that's fan engagement, whether that's another topic of interest, waste. No matter what, this has to be part of the conversation at your venue, in your city, in your league, so on and so forth. I think that would be really, really interesting to see in the next, 5 to 10 years.
Wonderful. Well, let's give it up for our panelists here this morning. Great job.